friends, it's Jasmine here with Pink and Main. I wanted to show you a couple projects I made using our new August product release. So we've got a ton of brand new sentiment stamps, some sentiment die strips, a gorgeous paper pad, and a bunch of glitter cardstock. I'm going to link a video in the description below to walk through all of those products. But I'm going to show you a couple projects and then we're going to make a card. First off is this thank you for everything card. I used some of the bigger sentiments in the background and embossed them on this pink cardstock, and then did a darker pink ink over the top to get a resist look. And then thank you for everything stamped with the sentiment strips. I used some of our ice rink glitter cardstock as a frame for the card. Next up is this always look on the bright side card. I used the rainbow gradient paper in the Summer Splash paper pad, and then just repeated this sentiment here on this yellow panel. And then I also stamped it on one of our sentiment strips and just layered it over the top just so that it would pull focus a little bit. And then I used some of our glossy dots as embellishments. And last but not least, this is the card that we're going to be making today. So thinking of you, I used all of these little sentiments here, the just because set, repeated in the background, and then did a series of embossing. So I thought it would be a fun technique to show you. And then to finish the card, I used some of our gold glossy dots and our gold glitter cardstock. The most complicated part of this card is setting up our Misty. So I'm going to use the grid that's on this backing paper and set up these stamps with one block in between each line, and that's 1/4 of an inch. Each of these stamps is about 1/4 of an inch tall. So in setting it up in this kind of staggered way, I'm going to be able to move the paper in the Misty to get a repeating sentiment background. And then I'm going to heat emboss it in one color and then stamp again and heat emboss in a different color. I went ahead and stamped the stamps on our backing piece here. This is going to help us when we're lining, for the staggering of the stamps, when we're lining things up, to kind of know where the stamps are going to land when we close the door. I'm going to line my paper up. I want it to kind of be in the middle of where these stamps land. So I'm going to start with it at the very, very bottom. Put our magnet here. And use some Versamark. And close our door. Now that I've stamped this, before I move it, we're going to cut a base out of this, so it's not going to be a huge deal. I'm going to mark here. And I'm going to slide this down. So I can see on the back here where the stamps are going to land when I close them. So I want this to be at this line to leave the space in between these two stamps. So I'm going to slide this over. Make sure that it's level on the side so our stamps don't go crooked. And I'm going to Versamark. And when you're doing this, you do want to work quickly, but this ink also stays wet for quite a while. So you can kind of be precise but fast, if that makes sense. So I'm going to slide this to the side. And I'm using the rose gold Wow embossing powder. So I will heat set this now. So there is the rose gold part done. So now we'll go back and stamp the second part. When we do this, we want to make sure when we first place the paper that we pay attention to where certain stamps are. I don't want the same words to be directly underneath each other, if that makes sense. So I know when we started up here. So I'm going to kind of split the difference and go in the middle. So I want this just because to be right here in between these. So I'm gonna place it here. And again, like the first time, flush against this first cube here. And I'll close our door. Okay, and again, I'm gonna make a little hash mark on our piece here. As I slide this piece down, I'm going to use the line, the little hash mark we just made, to make sure that everything is square and where I want it to be. So you'll see that the line is lining up right with the line of the cubes on the paper. And then I'm going to make sure that the stamps kind of fall in the middle of the pre-existing images that we already stamped. So I'm going to put the magnet here to make sure that the paper doesn't move, especially since it's hanging off the edge of my Misty. I want to make sure it doesn't budge as I stamp. And then at this point, I'm going to move the piece up. Again, I'm using the images that we stamped on the backing paper here to visualize where the stamps are going to land after I close the door on the Misty. So I'm going to get it where I want it to go, ink up my stamps, and then close the door. Alright, and that is our stamping done for this portion. I'm going to use the Wow Silver Pearl. And that is our background piece heat set. So you can see the white isn't super vibrant. You kind of just catch it in the light. I'm going to do a little bit of a soft inky halo here where our sentiment's going to go. So you'll be able to see it a little bit more. But in person, it's just beautiful. I'm going to use the largest rectangle in our stitched rectangle set 1 die set. Die cutting done. I used a bit of purple tape to hold the die in place as I went through the Gemini, just to make sure that nothing shifted or went a little wonky. So this is our background piece. We do need to do our sentiment. So I am going to stamp that and heat emboss it first. Rather than using the Misty for this, I'm just going to use one of our stamping blocks. Just to make things simple. I'm going to use Versamark again for this. And then the rose gold embossing powder we used a few minutes ago. That's all of our embossing for this card. So I'm going to fussy cut this part out. So the large sentiment is going to layer over the top of the smaller ones so that it doesn't get lost, because I feel like it kind of just blends into the background. I'm going to do some super soft blending. And I'm just going to keep checking in with my sentiment. I don't want this to be too dark, but I want to make sure that there's enough without going overboard. I'm trying to concentrate the color behind where the sentiment is going to sit. So I'm going to do a little bit more, kind of soften that a bit. And then I'll be close to where I want to go. Getting a little bit bigger here just to blend the more concentrated area of color out. The blending in the background is dark enough that you get a distinct line where this piece stops and the background starts. I'm gonna go ahead and start assembling our card now. I've got an 11 by 4¼ inch piece here. I'm gonna score it at 5½ to make a top folding A2 size card. And I'm gonna use some of our sparkle sheets. These are brand new with this release. We have 10 different colors. I'm gonna use the gold today. So I'm gonna trim this to 4¼ by 5½, and that is gonna be the front panel for our note card. Right. I'm just gonna use some Tombow adhesive here to attach this. All right, so I've got this piece attached to our background, and I'm gonna go ahead and glue this on. Because this glitter piece is somewhat textured, I'm gonna use a dry adhesive and a liquid adhesive just to make sure that it sticks. So I'm gonna use some Tombow dry and then just a little bit of liquid around the edge. With dry adhesives, they have a tendency to not want to stick to textures because they don't get into all the nooks and crannies of the texture, so things tend to not stick. I'm just gonna set that under my Misty while the glue dries. In the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and put some foam on the back of our sentiment. I have this cool tack foam that's clear. Obviously any foam will work. This is just what I have on hand here. So you can see it's not a ton of dimension. It's a relatively flat card, but doing the ink blending in the background and then also using foam dots just gives it that extra oomph. I'm gonna use some of our gold glossy dots to add just some finishing touches. And that's our card done. So it took a little while to get the stamp set up and get the rhythm of staggering the stamping the way that we did. But this is actually a really easy card. If you don't want to do embossing, the embossing is what makes it a little bit more difficult to do, just because you have to be speedy while you do it. You could also just use different color inks. You just want to make sure that you clean the stamps in between very well so that you don't get any bleed through. You could even do it all one color. So stamping like this on a colored background in Versamark ink to give a super light watermark look to your stamping would also be very pretty. Thank you so much for spending time with us here at Pink and Main. I'm going to put a link in the description down below on YouTube to our website to find all of these gorgeous products and more. And also check out our blog. Our design team has been posting a bunch of amazing projects with this new release. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.